Hey everyone, Sean Deveney here from Heavy Sports. We're here to talk a little NBA, especially the Celtics, with longtime NBA beat writer Steve Bulpett, who's now our Heavy Sports NBA insider. How are you, Steve?
I am fine, sir. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. It's been an interesting offseason to say the least here. We're August 10th, and the NBA is still front of mind. You remember back when people used to be on vacation at this time of year.
It was basically you could count on August to be a downtime, and then things would pick up again in September as teams kind of finalized their training camp rosters and whatnot. But then again, it was what 4 years ago, 5 years ago that the Celtics pulled the Kyrie Irving trade in August, I believe. So
Yeah, yeah, and the Kevin Love trade in Cleveland that happened in August as well. But it's certainly a rarity to have blockbuster deals being talked about at this time. But here we are.
yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah, and of course, the Celtics kind of are constantly dragged into this because they probably have the most attractive package for the Nets when it comes to making a Kevin Durant trade. Still seems unlikely that something like that will happen. Just your understanding, just where things stand with Kevin Durant, with the Nets, and the possibility, however remote, that the Celtics would get involved in that.
Well, the Nets are still asking a bunch, and I think they're finding that no one's really willing to come up with entirely what Brooklyn wants. And the Celtics, they can give up something, and I think that Jaylen Brown, again, we don't know exactly to the extent that his name is truly involved here, but assuming that his name is, he would appear to be the most attractive singular player that's been floated in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes anyway. But the Celtics can't give up too much because, again, as we've talked about before, they still have to be a championship contending roster after they're done giving up what they need to get Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Jaylen Brown obviously has been in the headlines for all this. One guy who I'm interested in terms of his reaction to all this, and that's Jayson Tatum, because he's done some interviews lately. He was at the New York City Point Guards premiere and did the red carpet there, so a lot of questions are fired at him. He's done, like I said, he's done a few interviews. He's been sort of he kind of keeps himself at a distance with this stuff, and generally with anything that goes on with the front office. Obviously, he's a young guy, 24, 25. Should he be more involved? Is it necessary for, if you're going to be a superstar player, that you have to have a voice in the front office, or can you take the Jayson Tatum approach and just kind of say, I just show up and play basketball?
I think he's smart to do what he's doing, which is not much. You saw him make a couple of relatively innocuous comments at that movie opening, and people were taking them and running in all different directions.
Yeah.
So, if he steps up to the front counter at Chipotle and asks for a burrito bowl, somehow that's going to be twisted into something. If someone overhears it, it's obviously being facetious and stupid, but it's a hobby. Yeah, I think what he's doing is a smart thing. Let the front office deal with it. If there was something that was egregious going on, then yeah, a star player needs to step up. But the Celtics aren't doing anything that's off the rails so far, certainly. And you would assume, and I would kind of know that Brad Stevens and Jayson Tatum. Brad Stevens is keeping Jayson Tatum apprised of what's going on. The relationship there is very important. The relationship with Brad Stevens and Jaylen Brown is important as well. So, but I think it behooves Tatum, particularly coming off a finals in which I'm sure he was disappointed as well. He's working on his game. He's getting some relaxation time, doing some fun things like going to a movie premiere. But he's doing work to get ready for next season, whether that work includes, on court, in the weight room, or just relaxation.
No concerns about the fact that, he probably has had, I would say he's had the opportunity to come out and just say, I want Jaylen Brown here. I want to play with him. I don't want to see him traded. He hasn't been definitive like that. But you don't worry about that affecting the relationship between him and Jaylen Brown?
No, I mean, if Tatum had been doing that kind of thing in the past and then didn't do it now, then you could see perhaps as an issue. But, I think the fact that he's never done that prior makes this a little bit easier for him.
Yeah. I wanted to change subjects a little bit here, and that's to talk about Ime Udoka, who we talked about a little bit last time we had a chat, Steve. And that was one of the aspects that you brought up was that Ime Udoka is going to improve as a coach, going from being a rookie last year to being in his second year this year. I just wanted to kind of see if you could expand on that a little bit. What do you think will be different about Ime Udoka this year, and what do you think he can improve on?
Well, I think last year it took him a while to really implement the way he wanted to do things. I'm not talking about the on-court X's and O's stuff. I think he wanted to establish himself first before he really came down on guys to say, look, this is how we have to do things, or, just from a motivational standpoint. But I think the biggest thing is that any first-year coach, there's at least a bit of a hesitancy with maybe trusting yourself so much with substitution patterns and the like. I think he leaned on veterans a little bit more than was healthy at sometimes. I think he went away from guys who needed minutes, younger guys. So I think this year he's got more veterans to play with, which, I'm sure that'll give any coach a greater comfort factor. But I see him being, then again, I'm going to say I fear that a guy like Peyton Pritchard could get buried again. Yeah. And even with with more people in the backcourt, you still have to find minutes for a shooter like that and a guy who advances the ball like that. But yeah, I think Ime will just the comfort factor with game management, I think will help him a lot. It's different going from being an assistant coach to being a head coach. A huge difference.
Yeah, it seems like they've got a roster now that's built a little more tailored toward what he wants to do. And, when he was in a tough position because the Celtics signed Dennis Schroder in August of last year, or late in free agency last year, and with the intention of basically playing him to trade him at the deadline. And that's a tough situation for a coach to be in. I mean, look, if Schroder played great and fit well, they wouldn't have traded him. But it was always going to be at least a 50-50 proposition. That's a tough thing for a coach, right? Because you want to play the guy. Obviously, you want to have him as a trade chip and boost his value, but you don't know if he's going to be here in the long term. So it's a little bit of a trick. This roster is much more straightforward in terms of what Ime wants to do, and it seems like that to me at least.
Yeah, I would think so. But I think, look, he's going to have to really be creative and careful with his big people. I'm not sure he has yet the kind of quality depth that he'd like to have in the big position. And as we've spoken about before, you need to make sure you get you manage minutes of both Rob Williams and Al Horford, but particularly the latter, Al Horford.
Yeah, I wonder how much we'll see some small ball. I don't know if you'll have Gallinari quite as a center, but with Grant Williams playing a little more center and trying to get creative with that, it seems like that's one way that they can try to handle some of that. But you run some risks there too. That you've got some real holes that can get exposed if you do that too much.
Yeah, and look, a lot of it's going to be matchup driven, right? There's the other team going small that allows you to throw Grant Williams into the middle, perhaps. And but again, the key is going to be making sure these guys get through the regular season healthy and strong and are ready for the grind that is the playoffs. Even though there's no back-to-backs in the postseason, it's still a grind mentally, physically, because the intensity gets ramped up significantly.
Yeah. And one last thing, Steve, I wanted to switch gears a little bit. When we're talking about Kevin Durant and the supposed trade offers that were discussed back in early July with after you get past Jaylen Brown, with Derek White being the secondary player from the Celtics side and what they might consider offering and the Nets demanding Marcus Smart instead of Derek White. I wonder about Marcus Smart and the Celtics wouldn't include him in such a trade. Did he improve that much last year? There's a perception, I think, that he did. He gets the Defensive Player of the Year, and obviously they played well. His own personal numbers and what he did was pretty much the same. But he gets a lot of credit for how that team played last year. Is that warranted? What did you see that was different from Marcus Smart last year? And did he really take a step forward?
Well, the way I looked at it, first of all, number one, defensively, Marcus Smart is really, the head of your snake. He's the guy that's offering the pressure out front, which is very important because you don't want to get into a situation where, guys are getting past the first line. And once you get past that, and if the offense has numbers, you get in the middle and someone's got to help out. Someone else could be open. That's where you get into foul trouble with your bigs. All that stuff comes into play. So yes, Marcus Smart is hugely important. And as a physical defender out front, Marcus Smart's hugely important. And as a guy that can, guard multiple positions, he's hugely important. Offensively, Marcus Smart plays very, very well when the team is playing well. And that would seem to be like a kind of a statement. But when the ball moves and it's, guys are passing and cutting, you see far fewer questionable shots from Marcus Smart. And frankly, you wouldn't want his scoring numbers to be that high because, you'd like to see the ball moving and getting to guys closer to the hoop in finishing positions. You'd want to see Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown's shooting percentages at the rim get even higher. You'd want to see, perhaps a Tatum and a Brown and even a Grant Williams, their uncontested three-point attempts going up. But that's part of an offense that clicks, which is what you saw a good amount of the time from Boston, but is what went away from the Celtics during critical times in the postseason and pretty much cost them the real shot they had to win the championship.
Yeah, 12 points, 6 assists from Marcus Smart last year. Subpar shooting, 41%, 33% from the three-point line. But that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story with him, especially like you say when the team is playing well and he can kind of convert those open looks and make teams pay for sagging off of them as much as he does.
And also, in the opposite direction, when the team is not playing well, then you're forced, Marcus Smart's shots are not going to be good shots. Yep. He's going to be forcing shots toward the end of the clock. He may even force shots a little earlier in the clock, which is a problem, obviously, that he's had. Marcus is a bit of a feast or famine on offense. But what he gives you in the overall, your overall toughness quotient, I think is something that's really hard to replicate. And as I know I've written over the past few years even that it's funny how some fans in Boston are like, they see Marcus Smart take 2 bad shots and they want him out of town. And there are even some people closer to the team that had similar feelings at times. But I think those people would be amazed. The fans that are anti-Marcus would be amazed at what his value is, how much he's coveted around the league, as a guy that can come in and be a culture changer for teams.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. Again, check out Heavy Sports for all your Celtics coverage, and have a good week.